The anticipation surrounding Carlos Alcaraz's return to Cincinnati is thick with an unspoken uncertainty, overshadowing the straightforward confirmation of his entry into the tournament. While Alcaraz steps back onto the court, Samuel Lopez now assumes the primary command of his coaching team, navigating a landscape where Jannik Sinner has undeniably seized control of the tour's dominant narrative. This pivotal shift means Alcaraz's revamped support staff faces an immense trial, one far more profound than a mere comeback from injury. The surface-level explanation suggests a fully recovered wrist and a champion intent on accumulating crucial match play before the intensity of New York's Grand Slam. However, the void left by Ferrero's departure, a man who dedicated 7 years to meticulously understanding and guiding Carlos, cannot be simply dismissed or forgotten after 4 months. Alcaraz himself once famously described Ferrero as just one member missing, a statement that initially seemed remarkably audacious given his subsequent triumphs at the Australian Open in Doha, making that declaration appear almost prophetic in its fearlessness. Yet, the season's trajectory dramatically altered in Barcelona, marking a turning point where Sinner not only ascended to the world #1 ranking, but also clinched their Monte Carlo final, maintaining a relentless momentum while Carlos was forced to sideline himself from both Roland Garros and Wimbledon. Consequently, the events unfolding in Cincinnati carry the potential to unveil vulnerabilities that earlier victories might have adeptly masked. Lopez, undoubtedly familiar with the established system, nevertheless lacks the unique authority and intuition Ferrero possessed in managing a jubilant champion whose natural inclination might be to chase the breathtaking, spectacular point, even if his recovering wrist isn't entirely prepared to meet such intense physical demands. Last year, when Carlos claimed victory in Cincinnati, Ferrero was already absent, still awaiting his return to the team after that specific tournament. This time, however, the landscape is different. No one is waiting on the sidelines. The true significance of this absence isn't merely the conspicuous empty seat that television cameras will undoubtedly highlight within Alcaraz's player box. Rather, it's the void left by the discerning judgment that once emanated from that very position. Samuel Lopez boasts an intimate knowledge of Alcaraz's forehand mechanics, his intricate movement patterns, and the deeply ingrained habits forged through countless hours of practice. His most arduous challenge, however, lies in precisely discerning when Carlos requires the exhilarating freedom to unleash his full potential, and crucially, when that very freedom risks spiraling into a perilous gamble for his health and performance. Lopez's integration wasn't a sudden disruptive arrival bringing entirely novel ideas or a pristine, unfamiliar notebook. After a coaching split, he had already been an integral part of Alcaraz's staff since late 2024, working in close collaboration with Ferrero throughout the monumental 2025 season. That remarkable campaign saw them secure an astonishing 8 titles, including 2 major championships, culminating in Alcaraz's deserved year-end #1 ranking. Both coaches were deservedly recognized with the prestigious ATP Coach of the Year award, making any insinuation of Simon Lopez's inexperience a blatant disregard for his direct and significant contribution to that unparalleled success. Nevertheless, his promotion to head coach irrevocably altered the fundamental structure of the team. Advice, no matter how sound, inherently carries a different weight when it's filtered through an intermediary, when another coach ultimately holds the power of the final decision. Previously, Lopez shared this weighty responsibility with a former world #1, Ferrero, who had known Alcaraz intimately since the prodigious player was merely 15 years old. Now, with Ferrero gone, every critical judgment, every defining decision ultimately rests solely with Lopez. This stark new context lends Alcaraz's poignant quote, "just one member missing," a strangely potent and unsettling power. The original intent behind those words was to project an image of seamless continuity, emphasizing that his dedicated fitness staff remained intact, his essential medical support was still firmly in place, and his brother Alvaro had assumed a more prominent supporting role, while Lopez, already deeply embedded, fully understood the intricacies of their daily routine. Carlos was striving to convey that he wasn't suddenly adrift among strangers, yet the wider audience, the keen-eyed fans, perceived something far sharper, an underlying sense of loss. That one member had been instrumental in transforming a naturally gifted teenager from Murcia into a multi-surface champion, a figure who intuitively understood Alcaraz's psychological responses after defeats, the precarious speed at which boundless confidence could mutate into self-sabotaging impatience, and the sheer magnitude of pressure the young star so skillfully masked behind his ever-present smile. Reducing such a rich 7-year history to merely one missing person struck many as cold and dismissive when decoupled from the complete explanation. The breakup itself provided fertile ground for social media, which quickly spun a narrative of conflict and discord. Alcaraz publicly acknowledged Ferrero, expressing gratitude for their shared journey, and Ferrero in turn offered his support. Though one particular sentence persistently resonated, he wished he could have continued their partnership. This seemingly innocuous statement later became the linchpin connecting their separation to fundamental disagreements over a proposed contract. Ferrero subsequently disclosed that he was given severely limited time to accept terms that contained conditions he simply could not endorse. While these facts do not conclusively prove that Alcaraz personally orchestrated the removal of an unwanted coach, they unequivocally demonstrate that the conclusion of their professional relationship was far less amicable and clean than the initial public statements implied. Ferrero's genuine desire was for their professional collaboration to persist under mutually agreeable terms, but the necessary agreement to facilitate that outcome never materialized. When fans meticulously scrutinized Instagram, they discovered that Ferrero had conspicuously unfollowed Alcaraz and other key individuals associated with his team. A simple tap of a button on a phone screen instantly became perceived evidence in a complex case that an already invested tennis community eagerly decided to investigate. Some were quick to label Ferrero as bitter, while others vehemently accused Carlos and his family of ungratefully pushing aside the very person credited with shaping his extraordinary career. The online verdict often arrived with a swiftness that preceded any comprehensive explanation from either side. Ferrero eventually clarified that he needed a period of distance, a separation that Alcaraz's frequent Instagram appearances inadvertently rendered more emotionally challenging. Ferrero steadfastly denied acting out of spite and consistently maintained a respectful tone when speaking about his former protege. His explanation, while shifting the narrative, did little to dispel the underlying sadness surrounding their split. A coach who had dedicated 7 seasons of his life to guiding Carlos found it understandably difficult to immediately witness the unfolding of the next chapter of his former player's career across his digital screens. The human element of loss was undeniable, yet the cutthroat world of professional sport relentlessly prioritizes results, offering little room for emotional sympathy. Ferrero entered 2026 with Samuel Lopez at the helm of Alcaraz's team, and a conspicuous target, the Australian Open, looming large in Melbourne. That major championship was the sole major missing from Alcaraz's burgeoning collection, and any failure there would have undoubtedly provoked immediate and intense scrutiny regarding Ferrero's absence. Carlos responded with the most emphatic result imaginable, tearing through the draw to reach the semifinal without dropping a single set, before valiantly surviving a brutal 5-set epic against Alexander Zverev. Physical distress, specifically regarding his wrist, emerged during that arduous match, even after Alcaraz had established a commanding lead, creating precisely the kind of high-stakes crisis that supposedly demanded Ferrero's seasoned guidance. Remarkably, Carlos managed to recover his energy and found the necessary mental fortitude and clarity to decisively win the deciding set. The final then presented an even greater challenge: Novak Djokovic, a figure who had historically exerted an almost proprietary claim over Melbourne, making every challenger feel transient and temporary. Despite losing the opening set, Alcaraz displayed incredible resilience, adjusting his game under immense pressure and ultimately prevailing in 4 sets. This monumental victory completed his career Grand Slam, cementing his place in history as the youngest male player to achieve this extraordinary collection of titles. Lopez, standing proudly within the winning box, was an indelible image that should, in theory, have put an end to the simplistic arguments surrounding Ferrero's departure. Alcaraz had confronted history, overcome significant physical distress, and conquered Djokovic, all without his former coach. He had not suffered any tactical collapse, and his emotional control remained firmly intact. The new coaching hierarchy had not only delivered but had triumphed, securing the most prestigious title available on the tennis calendar. The subsequent tournament in Doha only further solidified this compelling case. Alcaraz captured yet another trophy, marking an undefeated start to his season. His public expressions of confidence no longer sounded like a desperate attempt to conceal inner uncertainty. They were now demonstrably supported by his outstanding results. Lopez, it appeared, was more than capable of maintaining the established system while simultaneously fostering the player's development beyond the confines of Ferrero's direct control. However, the first cautionary signal arrived swiftly at Indian Wells, where Daniil Medvedev brought an abrupt end to Alcaraz's flawless start to the season in the semifinals. While a single loss, especially after an impressive 16 consecutive victories, hardly constituted a crisis, it did inject a subtle interruption into the prevailing belief that Melbourne had definitively answered every lingering question. Miami then added a layer of discomfort when Sebastian Corda unexpectedly defeated him in the 3rd round. Alcaraz still displayed flashes of his brilliant periods, moments of sheer genius, yet his overall control no longer appeared as automatic or effortless as it once had. The season had distinctly shifted from being a mere demonstration of his prowess to a rigorous examination of his resilience. In stark contrast, Sinner was surging in the opposite direction, his game defined by an unwavering core identity of precision and control. His powerful shots appeared incredibly clean and efficient because he wasted virtually no movement. While Alcaraz possessed the electrifying ability to transform a broken rally into high-octane theatrical drama, Sinner deliberately preferred to systematically dismantle any disorder before it could even fully manifest. This profound contrast in their playing styles elevated their burgeoning rivalry beyond a mere compilation of match results. Sinner went on to clinch titles at both Indian Wells and Miami, thereby exerting direct and significant pressure on the world rankings. Alcaraz arrived at Monte Carlo as the defending champion, carrying a substantial cache of ranking points amassed during his utterly dominant 2025 clay season. Sinner, conversely, arrived with a golden opportunity to gain substantial ground, possessing far fewer points to protect from the previous year. Both players battled their way to the final, with the coveted #1 ranking explicitly tethered to the outcome. Alcaraz, ever the showman, described the occasion as a dream setting, but it was Sinner who unequivocally controlled the match, ultimately lifting the trophy. During the awards ceremony, Carlos, with genuine sportsmanship, lauded his rival's impressive achievement. The respect was palpable, yet the underlying message was undeniably uncomfortable. Sinner had seized the top ranking. For the very first time during the Lopez era, Alcaraz was no longer merely defending his newfound independence from Ferrero. He was now actively chasing an opponent who had demonstrably discovered an entirely new level to his game. While Australia had undeniably proven Carlos could carve out history without his former coach, Sinner's relentless rise implied that his rival would not simply pause to allow the new coaching arrangement to fully settle. Barcelona then radically altered the entire argument. During his opening match, Alcaraz required encore treatment due to noticeable discomfort in his forearm and wrist. He bravely completed the victory, but the subsequent decision transcended the scoreline in importance. Continuing might have preserved valuable ranking points and appeased a fervent home crowd. However, withdrawing unequivocally protected the player's long-term health. The team made the courageous choice to withdraw. That decision deserves considerable commendation because Alcaraz's natural instinct is invariably geared towards fierce competition. Sheer joy alone doesn't always signal to an athlete when it's time to stop. A true champion can often interpret pain not as a limitation, but as yet another opponent to be vanquished. Lopez and the medical staff were tasked with the delicate and crucial responsibility of distinguishing between admirable courage and ultimately unnecessary, debilitating risk. However, merely leaving Barcelona did not resolve the underlying problem. His wrist stubbornly resisted conforming to a rapid recovery timeline. Madrid was the first casualty, followed by Rome. Eventually, Roland Garros became an impossibility, tragically removing Alcaraz from the defense of a major title he had previously dominated. Wimbledon then compounded the situation, creating an even greater emotional cost. Carlos had meticulously built a significant part of his global celebrity on the hallowed grounds of Center Court, winning consecutive titles there before Sinner heartbreakingly defeated him in the 2025 final. Missing the 2026 tournament meant surrendering his chance for immediate redemption and the opportunity to answer that painful loss. Each successive withdrawal profoundly altered how the contentious coaching decision would ultimately be judged. Returning too prematurely could inflict irreversible damage on the wrist, thereby jeopardizing his chances at the crucial US Open. Conversely, waiting longer allowed Sinner to consolidate an advantage that could prove exceedingly difficult to reverse. This, truly, was the underlying crisis, subtly hidden beneath the gleaming Australian Open trophy. Lopez had already conclusively demonstrated his ability to successfully coach Alcaraz through moments of triumph and victory. Injury, however, demanded an entirely different manifestation of authority. The objectively correct decision might momentarily cast the team as passive in the short term, but an incorrect decision held the devastating potential to negatively impact the player's entire future career. Ferrero, over their shared 7 years, had adeptly navigated numerous injuries, intricate scheduling debates, and Carlos's bouts of emotional exhaustion. His immense value could never be measured solely through the tactical instructions he delivered from the player's box. He possessed an intimate understanding of the precise personal language required when Carlos's fervent desire was to play, yet his body urgently demanded patience. Lopez, while possessing experience within the same demanding environment, had never previously carried this exact, singular responsibility as the permanent, undisputed head coach. Cincinnati, therefore, would not merely expose whether he understood the game of tennis, but crucially, whether Carlos was willing to accept his authority when his own deep-seated desire to compete inevitably collided with prudent medical caution. The cumulative effect of these months away profoundly altered Alcaraz's competitive standing even before he struck another ball in official competition. Sinner, meanwhile, successfully defended his Wimbledon title, solidified his position as the world number one, and significantly strengthened his claim as the tour's unequivocally controlling player. Alexander Zverev also surged ahead of Carlos in the rankings, pushing the Spanish prodigy down to number 3. This fall in the rankings was not a reflection of any declining ability on Alcaraz's part. It was a direct consequence of his prolonged absence. The relentlessly competitive nature of the tour does not, unfortunately, preserve a champion's position simply because his injury evokes sympathy. Ranking points inevitably vanish, other players advance and seize opportunities, and the tour relentlessly continues, creating new, compelling images without him at its center. Sinner, during this period, became the undeniable face prominently featured in those captivating images. He had remarkably won every Masters 1000 tournament contested during the first half of the season, and his second Wimbledon title irrefutably confirmed that his extraordinary momentum transcended mere favorable draws or fleeting temporary form. Alcaraz, from the sidelines, watched a new, established king emerge from a rivalry he had often comfortably controlled. He still maintained an overall winning record against Sinner, a statistic that provided some small comfort, yet the recent trajectory of their head-to-head encounters undeniably favored the Italian. Sinner had claimed victory in the 2025 ATP Finals Championship match, and then, crucially, defeated Carlos once more in their Monte Carlo showdown. This created the emotionally charged backdrop for the Cincinnati announcement. Prior to his official entry becoming public knowledge, every potential comeback date remained fluid and adaptable, a testament to the unpredictable nature of his recovery. In contrast, Sinner had been confidently posting his training clips and offering assured medical conclusions. A particular video showing Alcaraz practicing with his non-dominant hand during his rehabilitation garnered widespread attention, with supporters meticulously scrutinizing each frame for any glimmer of evidence that his formidable normal forehand had truly returned. The official entry, however, instantly shifted the entire conversation. August now presented a concrete target. Cincinnati organizers diligently began preparations for the arrival of their defending champion, while eager fans could now vividly imagine another thrilling potential meeting with Sinner. Mainstream media outlets treated the confirmation as a definitive return certificate, with excited social media posts declaring, "The king is coming back." Some accounts even audaciously claimed that his wrist had completely healed, citing his tournament commitment as irrefutable proof. However, a mere entry into a tournament can never genuinely prove competitive recovery. Practice environments, by their very design, create controlled stress. Tournament tennis, on the other hand, demands that the wrist manage an onslaught of unpredictable pace, execute awkward defensive stretches, and endure repeated high-intensity serving across several consecutive days. It also crucially demands efficient physical recovery long after the initial adrenaline rush has dissipated. Cincinnati, with its challenging conditions, will quickly provide those answers, as the environment rarely allows for a gentle, gradual return. The intense heat can significantly shorten recovery windows. Fast hard courts unequivocally reward early ball contact, while relentless opponents will ruthlessly attack any hint of hesitation. A player instinctively protecting one side of his body subtly alters his movement patterns, even when the underlying pain remains invisible to the naked eye. The serve should offer the very first useful signal of his condition. Alcaraz needs his wrist to perform through the acceleration phase, the point of contact, and the follow-through, while sheer speed on his serve wouldn't automatically confirm the absence of pain, as he could opt for safer placement. A repeated and noticeable reluctance to aggressively attack second serves would carry far greater meaning and concern. His forehand presents another critical test. Carlos generates immense power and heavy force by seamlessly combining the snap of his wrist with violent rotational movement through the rest of his body. During the delicate phase of a comeback, the most dangerous moment might not arrive on a comfortable, routine ball. Instead, it could appear when he is forced to reach late, attempting to generate speed and power from an awkward, compromised position. This is precisely where his unique, flamboyant playing identity profoundly complicates the recovery plan. Alcaraz possesses an extraordinary vision, seeing shot-making possibilities that other players would instinctively reject, and the crowd, in turn, ecstatically responds whenever he daringly attempts them. Cincinnati spectators will undoubtedly offer him a hero's welcome as their defending champion, inevitably increasing the irresistible temptation to dramatically announce his return through one of his signature impossible points. Lopez may find himself in the unenviable position of having to explicitly request ordinary tennis from Alcaraz. That request sounds deceptively simple until it is conveyed to a player whose very greatness is fundamentally predicated on his steadfast refusal of ordinary choices. Too much caution, however, can paradoxically make Alcaraz predictable and less effective. Conversely, too much freedom could place an unnecessary and detrimental demand on his still recovering wrist. Ferrero spent years meticulously learning where that crucial line between aggression and caution shifted during the ebb and flow of a match. Lopez must now accurately locate it under unprecedented conditions, as the undisputed sole head coach. The tempting comparison with last year's Cincinnati performance can, in fact, dangerously mislead viewers. While Ferrero did not attend Cincinnati in 2025, leaving Lopez to guide Carlos through the event, Alcaraz did reach the final and ultimately claimed the title after Sinner unfortunately became ill. However, Alcaraz entered last year's tournament with established competitive rhythm, his body having successfully navigated the rigors of the preceding summer schedule. Crucially, Ferrero remained the overarching head coach, and his return for the US Open was confidently expected. Lopez, therefore, carried tournament responsibility within a coaching structure that still belonged, in essence, to both men. Furthermore, the final itself concluded abruptly after merely 23 minutes, with Alcaraz leading Sinner 5-0 when the Italian retired due to illness. Carlos undeniably deserved the trophy, having won every required match, but that final never truly tested their respective strategies across a complete, full-length contest. A healthy Sinner would unquestionably present a far more formidable examination in 2026. He arrives in Cincinnati with significantly greater authority and, critically, a recent winning record over Carlos. Lopez would therefore need to implement independent, strategic changes against the very player who is currently setting the standard for excellence on the tour. Sinner's brand of controlled aggression is designed to specifically target the exact kind of uncertainty a recovering player desperately tries to conceal. He takes the ball remarkably early, thereby drastically reducing his opponent's reaction time. If Carlos attempts to protect his wrist by shortening his follow-through or delaying his full commitment to a shot, Sinner possesses the acute ability to instantly transform that slightest hesitation into immediate, overwhelming pressure. Alcaraz might endeavor to counter this by employing greater variety in his shots, altering ball height, and moving forward more frequently. These tactical choices would, in theory, reduce some of the lengthy baseline exchanges, although they demand incredibly sharp timing, especially after such a prolonged absence from competitive play. Drop shots, a signature Alcaraz weapon, become inherently dangerous when attempted from poor court positions, and net attacks invariably fail when the approach lacks sufficient depth and conviction. The tactical battle, consequently, transcends mere strategy and becomes intensely human. Lopez can meticulously deliver the objectively correct game plan, but Carlos must possess the profound trust in that plan, particularly when the score tightens and the pressure mounts. Ferrero's past authority stemmed, in part, from his successful navigation of earlier conflicts and disagreements with the player. Their shared history of overcoming such professional hurdles lent later instructions a crucial weight and credibility. Lopez certainly shares experiences with Alcaraz, including the glorious Australian Open triumph, creating a strong bond. Cincinnati, however, will rigorously test whether that bond holds firm when the coaching message becomes restrictive, when Carlos is told he should avoid a particular shot, finish practice early, or simply accept that one victory provides sufficient preparation before the colossal challenge of New York. The US Open casts a heavy shadow over every decision made now. Alcaraz is the defending champion, and New York offers far more than just ranking points. It provides an unparalleled opportunity to confront Sinner on the very surface where both players can profoundly influence the future direction of the sport. A deep run in Cincinnati could undoubtedly rebuild crucial confidence. Conversely, it could also leave Alcaraz with precious little recovery time before the major. An early defeat, while potentially protecting his body, might simultaneously create unsettling doubts around his current competitive level. Neither outcome can be fully understood or judged solely through the result itself. Sinner, now a global tennis heavyweight in his own right, derives his current formidable power from an almost unshakable competitive certainty. He remained on court, accumulating victories, while Carlos was forced into disappearance. Every trophy Sinner lifted made Alcaraz's absence feel incrementally longer. This is precisely why the enduring rivalry between them must remain at the absolute core of the Cincinnati narrative. Alcaraz isn't merely checking the resilience of his wrist against an early opponent. He is meticulously measuring the considerable distance that was created while Sinner so confidently occupied the center stage of the season. The established king now unequivocally hails from Italy. The hungry challenger, ironically, happens to be a 7-time major champion from Spain. Their reversed positions lend this comeback its compelling, dramatic edge. Cincinnati may reveal that Alcaraz, in fact, requires more time to regain his peak form. Such a result would not, however, prove that Ferrero could have prevented the injury or somehow accelerated his recovery. It would merely demonstrate that Lopez inherited a complex problem with no readily apparent easy solution. Alternatively, the tournament may instead reveal that the team managed the layoff with remarkable precision and correctness. Carlos could potentially return with free, uninhibited movement, controlled aggression, and sufficient patience to navigate difficult moments on court. This outcome would undoubtedly strengthen Lopez's authority far more profoundly than merely another routine title. Ferrero's indelible influence will, inevitably, persist within either outcome. Lopez learned directly alongside him, while Alcaraz's game developed under Ferrero's exacting standards. Coaching partnerships, by their very nature, leave behind deeply ingrained habits long after the person physically departs from the player's box. The permanent absence truly becomes visible, truly palpable, when those ingrained habits cease to provide adequate answers to a brand new question. Ferrero can no longer intervene after a painful forehand. He cannot study Carlos's performance overnight and make decisive changes to the next day's practice session. He cannot make the executive decision that the US Open matters more than an additional round in Cincinnati. Lopez, however, can. That, precisely, is the immense responsibility currently being tested. Carlos will still undoubtedly flash his characteristic smile if his forehand finds its mark. He will still instinctively search for that audacious drop shot that compels the crowd to rise to its feet. His innate joy for the game will not simply disappear because a layer of caution has entered the conversation. That instinct defines him too deeply, too fundamentally. Lopez's paramount task is to meticulously preserve that defining identity while simultaneously preventing it from uncontrollably dominating the critical comeback process. True success, in this nuanced context, might ultimately look less spectacular than fervent fans expect. It could mean gracefully accepting a shorter tournament run, judiciously refusing an unnecessary high-risk shot, or simply leaving Ohio healthy enough to mount a robust defense of his title in New York. Sinner, the new benchmark, waits patiently. His formidable position on the tour provides every Alcaraz result with crucial context, even if they never directly meet on court in Cincinnati. Carlos must unequivocally prove that 4 months away did not transform a once-balanced rivalry into a relentless chase he is now incapable of closing. Ferrero's empty seat will inevitably attract the relentless glare of television cameras because absence, in its stark simplicity, is easy to photograph. The far more profound and difficult change, however, exists within the unseen critical decisions. One voice now wields final authority, and Cincinnati places that singular voice under its greatest pressure yet. If Lopez manages to strike the delicate balance correctly, the new team will depart with something far more valuable than mere proof that it can win. It will leave with compelling evidence that Alcaraz can courageously survive uncertainty without needing to revert to his old coach. If, however, that crucial balance fails, the questions will inevitably follow them, relentlessly, all the way into the US Open.